Start recording. All right, hello and welcome to Minnesota Housing's public hearing for the 2024-2025 Qualified Allocation Plan, or QAP, and the amended 2022-2023 QAP. My name is Nicola Viana. I am the Housing Tax Credit Supervisor here at Minnesota Housing. Thank you for attending this public hearing. We are recording this meeting today. Today is October 4th, 2022, and the time is about 10 o'clock Central Time. Next slide, please. We have a few housekeeping items to start. We are using the GoToWebinar platform. Your line will be muted in order to get a clear recording. If you would like to speak today at the hearing, please send us a message in the question box that you can see with this arrow, letting us know your intent to speak. We will provide more direction once we get to that portion of the webinar. I'd like to go over a few features of the GoToWebinar platform. You have two options for listening to the presentation, which is indicated by this red box. You can listen through your computer using your microphone and speaker, or you may listen through your telephone. You should have received the phone number and access code as part of your webinar instructions. You can also find that information in the toolbar. I'll assume that since you're viewing this, hopefully you can hear me, but if at any time you lose audio during the webinar, try switching audio options or exit out and come back in, and we will have staff on hand to assist you. For attendance, the GoToWebinar tracks your who registers and attends the meeting. If you are listening in with someone else, you would like us to track your attendance, you can email us at htc.mhfa@state.mn.us, or you can send your name in the question box stating that you're in attendance and we can get you registered. If you do have a question throughout the webinar, you can write your question into the question box and we will answer questions at the end. Next slide, please. So this is our mission at Minnesota Housing. Housing is the foundation for success. So we collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance housing that is affordable. So Minnesota Housing provides access to safe, decent, and affordable housing and builds stronger communities across the state. So thank you for being here and thank you for being part of our mission to serve Minnesotans. We do have a number of Minnesota staff, housing staff, on the call today to listen to comments on the QAPs. We've got Summer Jefferson, our multifamily programs manager, James Lenhoff, our assistant commissioner of multifamily housing division, Vicki Farden, our housing policy specialist in our housing stability team, and Kelly Winter, our policy and compliance analyst. She'll be facilitating the comments, and Q Vang, our multifamily consolidated RFP manager. Next slide, please. Here is our agenda for the meeting. Nicola, will share background information on this hearing, and then Summer Jefferson, our multifamily programs manager, will give a brief overview of the QAP and the proposed changes. And then we'll have speakers will share their comments, and Kelly will call on them to speak. She'll provide an order of speakers in the chat, and then we will leave time for question and answers, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. So next slide. We do have a number of handouts for this session, and they can be found on the handout section. So we've got the 2024-2025 proposed qualified allocation plan with the red lines for this second iteration. And then we have the 24-25 proposed self-scoring worksheet, also with red lines for this second iteration. and because we had a first release in June. So this release just has the proposed changes since that first release. And then we have a policy with a proposed rent increase limit policy. And then we have the amended 2022-2023 QAP with a proposed reallocation policy. And these documents all are also found on our website that's linked here. And there was an e-news that went out on Wednesday, September 28th. Okay, next slide. So the Minnesota Housing is required by Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code to develop a qualified allocation plan for each year of tax credits allocated. Minnesota Housing must hold a public hearing for the credits, so this meeting represents that hearing. And the purpose of this hearing is to gather your comments and listen to the public voices. We published notice of this hearing in our September 21st e-news and in the Star Tribune and in the State Register. Following this meeting, we will record each public comment received and presentation and final action of the 24-25 Qualified Allocation Plan, the self-scoring worksheet, the methodology guide, as well as the amended 22-23 QAP are expected to occur at Minnesota Housing's board meeting on November 17th, 2022. Other tax credit allocating agencies in Minnesota will hold their own public hearings. So next slide, and I will turn it over to Summer to give us an overview of the Qualified Allocation Plan.
Thank you, Nicola. Can you hear me? All right. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining today. As Nicola mentioned, my name is Summer Jefferson. I am the programs manager for the multifamily. So I just want to start with to give a brief overview of the Qualified Allocation Plan and then kind of cover some of the changes that we're proposing in the second release. So the Qualified Allocation Plan, or the QAP, includes detailed definitions and procedures. I think we can go to the next slide, Patty. Sorry about that. Includes detailed definitions and procedures for implementing the low-income housing tax credit program and a self-scoring worksheet that assigns preference and points for developments that meet Minnesota Housing's low-income housing tax credit program, and then our deferred loan funding priorities. These two documents are the foundational component for evaluating all of the tax credit projects and the funding requests submitted to the agency in the annual multifamily consolidated request for proposal, or what we call the consolidated RFP. The 2024-2025 QAP, which is what we're looking at now, also sets the overall 2023 and 2024 consolidated RFP funding priorities. Looking back at our approach for this, the modifications for this Qualified Allocation Plan. So in our prior QAP, the 2022-2023 QAP, the agency made a significant amount of outreach and engagement with stakeholders across the state. We were able to make great strides and incorporated significant policy changes and made substantive changes to the scoring criteria as a result of the community input and engagement. And so the 2021 RFP that took place last year was actually the first funding round that we implemented those new policies. And we're just really starting to see the results of those changes. So because of that, our approach this round, or this year, was a bit more targeted and focused. We were concentrated on areas that we can continue to leverage the previous work and conversations and input from the public. And so we really were just looking to identify areas that we wanted to expand, streamline, or clarify. Then in the initial release in June, we proposed modifications to a few criteria. One was the greatest need tenant targeting category in our high priority homeless and our people with disabilities. selection criteria. We looked at our geographic criteria and proposed modifications to the workforce housing criteria, and also our methodology, our hold harmless methodology provision, and also looked at our rural tribal criteria. We streamlined and simplified, clarified some areas in our equitable development criteria. We expanded for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women-owned business enterprises. We expanded and added additional tiers in that criteria. And then we made some definition changes to our rural development small project set-aside definition for the housing tax credit program to expand, increase the number of units in the type of projects that would be eligible under that set-aside. So then after 1 month of a public comment period and 2 engagement sessions, we received multiple comments. We read through the comments and made further adjustments to the QAP in the self-scoring worksheet. The changes that are incorporated into the second release are the result of the public input, feedback, and all of the comments that we've received thus far. And so for the second release, we are proposing the following changes. One is a new proposed rent increase limit policy. The agency received a number of comments requesting a policy that would look at limiting the size of annual rent increases for properties, for tax credit properties. The purpose of this new policy is to limit the size of the annual rent increases to help mitigate the impact to cost burden households and to help prevent economic displacement for families and occupants, residents. We have drafted several different policy options for additional public feedback, and those are incorporated into the proposed rent increase limit policy document that is attached. The different options kind of represent variations of relief provisions for rent increase and consider rent increases that exceed 5%. They consider the type of funding or the program that the project is funded with, and then also it looks at the potential population. So we are seeking additional feedback and additional comments regarding this. The details, again, are included in the attached policy document. The second new proposed change is a new reallocation policy. It is located in Chapter 2B of the Qualified Allocation Plan. The purpose of the reallocation policy is to allow a return and a reallocation of 9% tax credits for projects that have previously received an allocation and are unable to place in service by the required IRS deadline. These projects, you'll see that in these projects will be required to pay a fee to request a reallocation, and then there must meet certain criteria in order to qualify. We've just basically, essentially would allow, it's extenuating circumstances which could entail or could include a natural disaster, fire, obviously dealing with the global pandemic. Those are also things that we would be looking at, but the circumstances, the criteria are incorporated into the Qualified Allocation Plan. We also are proposing a modification to the preservation criteria. These modifications are under Tier 2, other existing federal assistance and critical affordable units. These modifications are, again, just to streamline and simplify for external stakeholders, just to kind of, and are based upon the comments that we've received. The last change is in enhanced sustainability. We have added an additional tier, which is Tier 4, to cover alternative building performance pathways such as passive house and other options. In addition, there are other, you'll see other, in the red line, there are just other clarifications and streamlining that are incorporated into both of the documents. And then finally, we are proposing an amendment to the 2022-2023 Qualified Allocation Plan. This is to incorporate the reallocation policy that I just previously discussed. It is the same policy that is mentioned in the 2024-2025 QAP. If this is adopted, the proposed amendment would apply to all the projects that have received an allocation of 9% tax credits from Minnesota Housing, and that could potentially seek a reallocation under the 2022-2023 QAP. That concludes the new proposed changes for the second release, and I will turn it back over to Nicola. Oh, hi, James. I think
you're on mute, James. And this is James, not Nicola. Sorry. It says it on your like name that is you're me, but there's just one James and one me. Oh, we still can't hear you. Why don't you work on that? And I'm just going to mention that we've had a couple of questions come in, and we're going to save those for the end because we want to make sure to get the comments through. So we'll give Summer a little time to read the questions, and then we'll cover those at the end. And I also want to mention that we do have our Commissioner Jennifer Ho and Deputy Commissioner Rachel Robinson are also here listening to the public comments. So thank you both for joining us. So and let's see, yeah, we're on the right slide. So the public comment period opened on September 28th in 2022. If you have further comments after this hearing today, we will accept comments until tomorrow, Wednesday, October 5th, 2022 at 5 o'clock Central Time. Oh, here's James. I think he might want to say something in just a minute. So here are the ways that you can make comments. I'm going to turn it over to him. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. This is James Lenhoff, the Assistant Commissioner for the Multifamily Division at Minnesota Housing. Hopefully you can hear me now. Sometimes when technology doesn't work and you're in the same physical location, you can just join them in their office. But I just wanted to note a couple of things. And first, just to thank you to everyone out there that submitted comments in the first public hearing and the comment period, and then also is participating today. This really does have an important impact on the overall process. There are a number of proposed modifications in this next version of the Qualified Allocation Plan that come from those public comments, and that was the same in the previous round. The other thing I just want to take a note on, because I do know that there's interest for those proposed rent limits on annual rent increases and the different options that were posted on our website. And what we are looking for is different feedback and thoughts and responses to those to determine how or if they are ultimately incorporated into this next Qualified Allocation Plan. It may be that they are not the fit for this QAP, or it is a modified version of what is out there. So we are looking for both comments either today or written comments to help us think through to determine what the appropriate next steps are. So again, we welcome additional feedback and thoughts on that. And thank you so much for everyone's participation. And since I interrupted Nicola's formal presentation and taking over part of her desk here, I will turn it back over to her. The other thing that I'll note regarding this QAP, including if there is ultimately any limits on annual rent increases, is for projects under this QAP only. It is not retroactive to previously selected projects or projects that are in operation, because that is the nature of how the QAP works. It is for current projects and moving forward. So with that, thank you, everyone. I will give Nicola hers back here and see if I can figure out my own computer.
All right, so there are a number of ways that you can share your comments. Since these are public comments, we will share all comments on our website after the public comment period. You can email your written comments to htc.mhfa@state.mn.us, or you can mail them to us at this address listed on the screen. You can also call our office if you prefer to make a comment by phone. Kelly, our policy and compliance analyst, who will be facilitating the comments, we've got her phone number listed here. So I will turn to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who will facilitate our public comments.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kelly.
As Nicola mentioned, my name is Kelly Winter, and I'll be facilitating the speakers today. Speakers will have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a warning when there's about 1 minute left so you can properly wrap up your thoughts and you're not abruptly cut off. Our first speaker today is going to be Don Cordes. Don, I will unmute you. And Don, you'll want to make sure to unmute yourself as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I guess I would like to start by introducing myself. You already know my name. And yes, I am a senior. I'll just give you a little bit of background. For 10 years, I was with my mom in my childhood home in Fridley, taking care of her until she passed away at 99, which was her wish. That's where she wanted to die. So between my brother and I, we were able to take care of that and do that for her, and I couldn't be more happy. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that there's so many transitions in our lives that we require affordable housing. And I know the Minnesota Housing addresses all of them, but for us now, it's in our senior years, that's kind of where our focus is going to be. My first stop at transitioning into senior housing was before my mother passed, when she was starting to fail. The Spring Lake Park Legends was being built. I was so excited. I could be in my hometown, I'd be close to friends. And so I went, I put money down and applied, even picked out my apartment. And then because of a physical issue, I could not do it when it was released. So I took my reservation back. After my mom passed, I continued my search then to look for affordable senior housing. And I went back to Spring Lake Park Legends, and I was totally appalled. There was just chaos everywhere. I was told it was going to be a 55 plus senior. There were many children, dogs running up and down the hall, broken tiles. And even when I was shown an apartment, there was 3 teenage boys that really were intimidating. So I was very uncomfortable with that and felt, boy, I missed a bullet. So then I continued on to River North, which is where I live now. And at River North, just like before COVID, I signed the lease. So I moved in and it was COVID. I could see nobody. I loved my apartment. I had a wonderful time here, but it was very isolated during COVID. And I had been looking forward to meeting people, playing cards in my new neighborhood. Eventually, it did work out, and met new friends and reformed partnerships or collaborations, and it's been very happy in my planning. This is to be my forever home. There was some repair or cleaning issues that came up while even the first year, but most of them kind of got taken care of. I had now felt that I had a community that I felt safe in until a robbery out of my car stole my golf clubs out of the underground parking. I was told there was no cameras down there, so there was not a way to see. We've had other issues with people coming in, and I do think they're more careful, but that still is an issue. I saw many, many inconsistencies as I went from apartment to apartment, building looking, even if they were under dominium and their policies. For example, the fees were different. If I had a pet, it was this charge or that charge. Many different, nothing the same, I guess, is basically to say, like, you have to shampoo your carpet when you move out. I'm like, what? That was kind of strange. So anyway, I now thought
There's 1 minute remaining.
Okay. I hadn't rented since I was 25 or 26. So the 51-page lease that I signed for the second year was a rude awakening. I could not even in myself understand everything. So I definitely started researching a lot of things, understanding a little bit more about Section 42 and what options there were. We got hit with a 12.5 rent increase this year, and it is absolutely terrible. It has caused fear, stress, anxiety, and just a lot of panic for some of the people here, even family disruptions. But mostly for me, it was, I'll be losing my community if I have to move. And this is where I wanted to be. Dominion targeted seniors, so they knew all along getting this tax rate would involve having people on a fixed income. So I really don't understand that kind of an increase. What I would propose for a solution to some of these issues is that when you get done and operations been running, and when you're doing inspections, take back that self worksheet and see how many compliance issues are still there. And the compliance manual itself had a restriction out of it about unacceptable practices. I definitely think that needs to be addressed.
Unfortunately, your 5 minutes is up, so if you can wrap up quickly, thank you.
Okay, the last thing I would say is check things like the Better Business Bureau, D+, comments out from the public, all over the public, and get a pattern and see really where we are sending our money as public housing. So as seniors, we need transparency, stable costs, and secure futures. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Don.
Thank you so much, Don.
All right, next up we have Catherine Banbury. I will unmute you here. Catherine, if you want to unmute yourself as well.
Okay, there we go. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Catherine Banbury, and I am speaking as an impacted tenant in a Dominion building in St. Paul. I am also a tenant organizer in my building and in other St. Paul Dominion buildings because of their deeply troubling track record of raising rents to the highest AMI level permissible every single year, including during the statewide economic crisis and the global pandemic, grossly impacting Section 42 tenants, many who are living on a fixed income. Knowing Dominion is a recipient of vast public subsidies to provide affordable housing, including 4% LIHTC bonds, City of St. Paul TIF financing, STAR funding, as well as federal home funding, I am deeply troubled that Dominion acts as if these public subsidies cannot be counted on to keep rents affordable. Under the guise of affordability, Dominion is using this money to pad its bottom line at the expense of low-income and fixed-income tenants. My neighbors enter Dominion buildings as though through a revolving door, believing we have found stable housing, only to have rents raised year after year, creating untenable stress from fear of being economically evicted, and in many cases, displacing countless numbers of my neighbors. Because of this, I worked hard on passing a much-needed rent stabilization ordinance to ensure everyone has a home they can count on. I also sat on the mayor's task force, fighting back the attempts to strip the ordinance with exemptions that would keep the 3% cap, protection in name only. Our efforts were heartbreakingly dashed as the City Council recently voted to exempt all affordable housing and new construction for 20 years retroactively from the protections of the ordinance. Now more than ever, we believe entities like Dominium, with known track records of poor treatment of tenants and no commitment to long-term affordability, creating a massive displacement of low-income folks, further entrenching racial and class inequities in our housing system, should not receive public money. Further, we do not believe that Dominium or any for-profit developers should be receiving public money to build affordable housing unless they commit to a permanent affordability. We need MHFA to prioritize deeper affordability and long-term commitment from developers like Dominium to keep units affordable. Ultimately, we believe rent increases should be capped at 3% per year. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for your comments. Next, we have Sue Watlove. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. I'll unmute you here.
And Sue, be sure to unmute on your end.
Yep, I am unmuted. Thank you so
great.
much. Sue Watlove Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of MICA, the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing, where we want to be a welcoming community and treat others as ourselves and ensure that everyone has a safe, decent, accessible home that's affordable for them at their income. I want to thank Dawn and Catherine for their incredible comments, because we want to ensure that people are using their voice and their God-given voice and power to say what we need in regards to housing, both folks that are experiencing homelessness as well as needing affordable housing. I'm going to be very specific on the plan and the different documents. And so on the plan on page 16, in regards to units that are subsidized cannot be charged higher than unsubsidized units, is our understanding under the Fair Housing Law. The third point is on the reallocation. We do support that. Encourage you to look at your wording on that. It says submit. They do not need to submit a new applicant. They are not required to submit a new applicant or be scored against other applicants. I don't know if it's against other applicants. So I think there's just maybe a word that might need to be looked at there. In regards to the scoring criteria, we strongly support the claiming of points, that if you're going to claim points, you need to follow through and be accountable for what you said that you were going to do, and that you could lose your funding if you do not do that. Under supportive housing, we do greatly agree that people that are coming in under the homeless units or long-term homeless should not have to go through coordinated entry. We see units sitting vacant for 2, 3, or more months because of the slow process of coordinated entry. In regards to the clarification between points for preservation and rental assistance, we think that's a very positive clarification. We still have concerns around the transit lines. While we do know that a number of folks that have more limited income do not drive, a vast majority of people, 67%, do drive. And so we do think that people do have vehicles that they can travel a few miles back and forth to their job as well as to community resources. And then we're also concerned about the on-call of different types of public transportation. Not all of those systems are available Monday through Friday and 8 hours a day. So we'd like to see having greater flexibility there for especially our smaller communities, rural communities, and suburban communities that may not have that availability for that number of hours or days. In regards to the equitable development, we think it's a much clearer section, and we greatly appreciate this being added. We think that people that are experiencing homelessness, people in the community that need affordable housing, need to be very involved and the diversity of folks within the community in the development. We think 3 points is way too low. It should be closer to 10 or more points, and just need to continue this with all the folks that are involved in the development too. So we would encourage also additional points that if you are having diverse developers or contractors working with you, that you can get additional points too. In regards to the business section with Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women, it's unclear that Hispanic, Latino communities are included in that, and we want clarification there. And then we want to thank you for continuing to push the energy efficiency of all buildings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Next up, we have Michael Dahl. Michael, you've been unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to comment on the 2024-2025 Qualified Allocation Plan. My name is Michael Dahl, and I'm the Public Policy Director with Homeline. Homeline is a nonprofit statewide tenant advocacy organization, and our primary program is a hotline that any renter in Minnesota can contact to receive free and confidential legal advice about their rental situation. Since opening in 1992, we have had over 290,000 renter households throughout the state contact that we've advised, and we currently advise over 3,000 households each month. Our services are available in English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. Today, I want to address the proposed rent increase limit policy and the draft options that Minnesota Housing compiled to seek advice for how or if to limit the size of annual rent increases in the future. But first, I want to begin by noting that Minnesota cannot lose the number of affordable housing units, truly affordable housing units, because Minnesota currently has an incredible gap that we're facing. According to the Minnesota Housing Partnerships report, State of the State's Housing 2021, in Minnesota, there was a critical need for housing, particularly for extremely low-income renters or renter households that earn at or under 30% of the area median income. There are approximately 169,000 renter households in the state that fall into this category, yet there are only 64,238 affordable and available units for this income level across the state. That leaves a gap of 105,347 units needed for extremely low-income renters. Homeline has advised thousands of tenants in low-income housing tax credit subsidized units, and many of these calls to our hotline, especially most recently, have been about the substantial rent increases after HUD published the new area median income data, and thus the legal 12.5% rent increase that landlords in many Minnesota tax credit subsidized properties could burden their tenants with, as it was commented on by two speakers before. This situation is a situation that thousands of Minnesotans, low-income tenants, are having to contend with right now, and as you just heard from those who were impacted by their own words. We want to thank Minnesota Housing for seeking comment on how to ameliorate this situation moving forward. Of the 6 rent increase limit policy options proposed, their first one is the most protective of tenants, as it covers the widest range of units and types of subsidized buildings. It has the least exceptions and is absolutely necessary to prevent displacement of tenants from now and in the future. However, option 1 still has exemptions that will reduce the number of units affordable to low-income tenants, units that are vacant, and units where a tenant has some other rental subsidy that would not be covered. These exemptions should be removed to ensure the most number of units remain affordable to the current and future tenants. Keep it simple, no exemptions. Again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to offer public comment on this critical situation.
Thank you, Michael, for your comments. Okay, next we have Judith Cronin. Judith, I'll be unmuting you. And just make sure you unmute yourself on your end.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, hi, my name is Judith Cronin, and I'm a resident at one of the 55 plus senior buildings, and I've been living here for 7 years. And it's just great to be able to talk to somebody finally regarding what it actually is like to live in a property such as this, because on the micro level, there's a lot of things that are going on that people in policy making on the macro level do not realize. And one of them we talked about is the rent increases that have been continuing throughout the years at the maximum rent level allowable. When we were told, all of us, when we first moved in 2015, that our rent would probably increase like $10 to $15 per year at our lease renewal, which has never been the case except for 1 year when there was no change in the rent increase. I think that was 2016. However, I just want to say that if there's going to be rent limits, there has to also be an acknowledgement of additional fees that the owners may charge if there are rent limits imposed, because some of the owners actually are pretty excessive in attaching additional fees that actually increase our monthly rent when they are prohibited from doing other things to get rents that they wish to receive. Another thing is the utility allowance that's part of the maximum rent allowable. That utility allowance should be set by another agency and not allow the owners to set the utility allowance, because they can manipulate the utility allowance to decrease it, and then consequently they are able to capture the amount of the decrease of the utility allowance and get that additional money in rent collected by the residents. So it's really hard for us as residents to try to conserve on our utilities, because if we do, they will say, well, your consumption of utility has gone down, so we could decrease your utility allowance, and thus they can charge us more for rent that they get into their budget. And I think that's something that is really counterproductive to both having people allow them to conserve on their bills and also for saving energy in the broader picture of climate change, etc. So also I was wondering, what in the proposals for the rent limits, what does it mean by the different, if the resident has other options for rental assistance? Does that include the Section 8 housing vouchers too? So persons who are receiving Section 8 housing vouchers would not be protected under these rent limit proposals. And I think I really agree with the speaker before me that it should be kept simple, and there should be no exceptions to the different types of renters that are in the buildings. They should all be entitled to the rent limits proposed and initiated and established if so. So I guess that's all I have to say, and I really hope that something happens, because I think a lot of us are really tired of the term affordability, affordable housing. It's so overused that it's really a phrase that is rather meaningless at this point in time, and it would be nice to have the meaning put back into that phrase, that things are really affordable for people to live in the community. Another thing I want to say is that some affordable housing that's being built today currently does not have the same amenities that the market rate apartments have. And I don't know, I think that's pretty discriminatory. I think that affordable apartments should also have the same basic appliances, such as a washer dryer, in their apartment, and not have to go to an antiquated laundry room to do laundry if other apartments have those same amenities. I think that the affordable apartments should be treated likewise in this 21st century. I don't think that washer dryers are considered a luxury in this time. So I noticed that is happening, and with that too, affordable housing units without laundry in their apartments have to pay for their laundry, which adds an additional cost to their monthly housing costs, up to like $50 per probably a month. And I think that there's a lot of hidden costs in affordable housing that people don't know about on the micro level that should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Lugene Flores. Lugene, I have unmuted you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I am an impacted senior individual living in the Legends of Spring Lake Park, which is a Dominion property. And it is advertised as a 55 plus community. There are more families here than there are seniors. Also, some of the things that go on here are atrocious. We were without an elevator for 7 weeks. And in that 7 weeks, we had half of our building that remained in their homes because they were unable to walk to the other elevator. And they said that they had to order the part from Switzerland. I've never heard of anything like that. One of the things that is really troublesome for me is since the rent increases have gone up, we now have 14 vacancies in our building. I just worry and wonder where those individuals went to. At this time in our lives, we should not be worried about where we are going to live. I'm real emotional about this because I know so many people that are making hard decisions. Most of us are one more rent increase away of being homeless. You know, we have many seniors that once they pay their rent, they have to make a decision if they're going to buy food or if they're going to pay for their medications. I know of one individual that takes his medications every other day so that he can afford to buy food. That's not healthy. That's, you know, as far as living in our final places, this is what we came to. And then we're here, we're intimidated by the teenagers in the building. We get broken into in our garage, vehicles broken into, stolen from catalytic converters. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, they smoke pot down in the downstairs and it's supposed to be zero tolerance, but they say that they're not going to watch the videos. Also, many of the residents here have waited up to 8 months to get repairs done in their apartments. I don't think that is right, you know. I myself haven't waited, but I know a lot of my neighbors have. What I would like to see happen is I would like there to be better monitoring of compliance. And maybe one of the things that could happen is contact a couple of residents in the building. I mean, you guys have access to resident records as you're checking for compliance. Contact a couple of the residents. Find out what really is going on in buildings. And I believe that any for-profit developer that is submitting the application must make a commitment to permanent affordability with a rent increase cap at 3%. Thank you guys for listening and allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much.
Okay, our next speaker is Isaac Meyer. Isaac, I will unmute you here. You should be set. Isaac, just make sure to unmute yourself. There you go. You should be set to go.
Hello? There we
Hello.
go.
Yep.
Hi
Yeah, we
there.
can hear you.
I'm Isaac Meyer. I live up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I work for Kutaska Community Action. We are a human services nonprofit and also a developer of housing in rural northeastern Minnesota. And I had two primary comments I wanted to make regarding the QAP. The first concerning the workforce housing communities. Per the methodology guide, communities in greater Minnesota are defined as one, either urbanized areas with populations greater than 50,000, such as Duluth, or two, reservation and small urban areas with communities with 500 or more households. And that 500 or more household is used as a minimum threshold. That means that communities with less than 500 households are by definition excluded from any consideration for workforce housing community points. In northeast Minnesota, where we have a history of mining and forestry that determine the location of our communities, we have numerous cities located very close together that share borders. As you might see in a metro area and its suburbs. For example, we've got the Iron Ranges Quad Cities or Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and its many outlying communities. Unfortunately, since those communities with less than 500 households are purposefully excluded from receiving any workforce housing points, we have situations where communities that would otherwise qualify for those points and participate in larger market areas are simply excluded and denied those points. And it's understandable that Minnesota Housing may have a reason to, without consideration of any particulars, exclude such small communities broadly, where those communities maybe have a market size deemed by Minnesota Housing to simply maybe not be worth that type of investment and are worth excluding. And when we apply this, though, to our communities in northeastern Minnesota, where those communities are part of a larger market and may only be, 15 feet just across a border away from those markets, it seems untenable to really exclude them from those eligibility criteria solely because they don't meet those thresholds. I'd say a great example of these would be the communities of the Prairie, Deer River, or Bovee, where if you were to check the community profile, you would see that they are on all sides surrounded by communities that qualify for those points. And they would qualify themselves, but being fewer than 500 households, they are just simply excluded. The second comment I'd hope to make would be regarding the individual employer growth community criterion within the QAP. For non-metro communities, it's not uncommon to have a primary employer with a directly linked but independent vendor. And together, those two employers would well meet the net 100 job growth requirement. But individually, they cannot. For example, in Grand Rapids, we have a manufacturer of compact track loaders that exports globally. And less than half a mile from this manufacturer, we also have their vendor who provides all of their hydraulic cabling. Between the two, they well meet the job growth criteria, but alone, they do not. And this is not really uncommon on the Iron Range or rural communities where business growth is rarely limited to a single business. Often we have a small emergent cluster, such as an agriculture or a manufacturing niche or wood and forestry products. And this set of 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 businesses will grow together and employ many employees and would well meet that criteria. But individually, you might not have one employer with that large explosive growth. This kind of collaborative diversion of both the profits and the risk, I think, is fairly common in many communities, likely metro as well. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Isaac.
Kelly, we can go ahead and see if there was one more speaker that had their hand raised, but I just want to acknowledge that it is almost 11 o'clock when we advertised that we were going to be finished, but we can extend the public hearing to make sure we get the comments in. And Patty, can you just go to the previous slide so people can see how to make comments again? So in case you did want to make a public comment, you can email us or mail us or call Kelly. It might be good if you want to call over the phone. We'd appreciate if you email us so that Kelly can know how many people to call back, because I know she's getting quite a few phone calls. So Kelly, I'll go ahead and let you call on the next person to make a comment.
Janet, did you have a question? Your hand is raised.
And can we unmute her line just in case? And Janet, you can unmute your line also.
It looks like she is no longer raising her hand.
Okay, so in the final minutes,
Someone who has their, is it Michael Tronstad has his hand raised? Or was that from earlier?
I'm going to unmute his line. Kelly?
Yep, I just did.
Oh,
Michael,
okay.
did you have a question?
And Michael, you may need to unmute your line on your end. Okay, it looks like we do have folks that would like to speak. So if you could put your name in the chat, or Catherine, if you could help us facilitate who wants to speak and send that to us so we can unmute their line. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I'm going to just run through the rest of our PowerPoint, which is just a couple of slides to let you know where things are on our website. So Patty, if you can go forward 2 spaces on the PowerPoint, and we'll tell people about our website. So our website is mnhousing.gov. So if you're looking for information on our website, you would go to this web page, and on the right-hand side it says multifamily rental housing. And Patty, can you go to the next slide? And then you would go on this beige toolbar. There's a space for tax credits. It's where this red box is. And then further down is another red box where it says Qualified Allocation Plan. So that is where we have all of our documents, both from this round of red lines and also the red lines from our initial release, which was in June. And then we'll also have the public comments posted on this page, and we'll have the final documents will be on this page as well. And then you can go to the next slide, Patty, and this is our contact information. So if you would like to still make a comment, you can email us at this email address, htc.mhfa@state.mn.us. And my information is here too if you have tax credit questions, or that HTC stands for Housing Tax Credit questions, that can go to me, Nicola, or if you have any qualified allocation questions, that can go to Summer. And so let me see if there's any, do we have anyone else that would like to speak?
Looks like Charlene Golger, sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly, has her hand raised. If you can unmute
Charlene,
it.
yeah, your line is unmuted if you would like to speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can, yes.
Okay. What is the reality of affordable housing? An affordable senior apartments banner caught my eye in 2016. I was one of the first to move into River North Apartments by Dominium in December of 2016. This was to be my forever home. My monthly rent was $10.64. On December 1st, 2022, my rent will be $15.06, up from $13.35. My Social Security is $14.70. The national average Social Security check is $15.42. Dominium participates in the affordable housing program known as Section 42, or Low Income Housing Tax Credit. They base yearly rent increases on the maximum allowable amount determined by HUD and the AMI. How can seniors' fixed incomes be part of the AMI calculation? Why are developers who claim to offer low-income housing allowed to use a maximum allowable increase? In reality, they are phasing out low-income tenants. The Affordable Seniors Apartments banner is still hanging on my building. This is an egregious lie. I am fortunate and healthy enough to be able to work a part-time job that I love. Many of my friends and neighbors do not share that good fortune. We all want to feel some peace of mind regarding our future housing. It's not just about the money, it's about our mental health. You do the math. How long can this continue before seniors are bled dry of every limited financial resource they may have? Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene.
I think we also have Mike Tronstad and Jan Bregelman. Oh, I don't.
Michael, you've been unmuted. I want to make sure to unmute yourself.
And if you're using a phone, you could try *6. That sometimes works if you press *6.
Janet, I can see that you're typing in the questions, but from our side, it looks like there's not an audio connected. I'm not sure if you dialed into the number, that could be helpful, or if you are on your computer and you used your computer audio, but it's not showing that there's audio connected.
You could also, we can make sure to get your number, which I think we might have your number in the chat, and we can call you later today too. So Kelly, let's move on to Janet Bregelman.
And Janet, I don't see any audio for you.
So hopefully you all can hear me. On your go-to panel, there's an option at the top that says audio. You have to click the down arrow and there's options. You can listen through your computer or phone or a phone call. So if you have a phone, you can click the phone call option and a phone number will come up and then you can call in. And then there should be a pin, I think, to dial in so you can talk. I'm sorry for all the options and steps.
So in the interim, Nicola, do you just want to run through some of the questions so that we can potentially answer?
I think we got through the questions. I think we answered them. So we were so there were some questions that were sent to us and we sent responses. So if you have an additional question or if your question wasn't answered, just let us know. But I think we've gotten all of them.
Generally, I just want to also just say, I think some of the questions were in regards to the rent increase policy and what it would apply to it, as far as it would be effective if we move forward with the policy. It would be for the 2024-2025 QAP, which is what James had mentioned. And so it would be for projects that would receive a new allocation of those tax credits or funding in our RFP in the next round. So I think there was a question of whether it would be for projects placed in service in 2022. So those projects, it would not impact those projects. It would be moving forward and be applied to all projects that receive new funding. And then another question we got was, how long would this policy be in place? The policy would be in place for the term of the loan or the declaration on the property. So those can be, it's a minimum of 30 years, but they can, in some instances, they elect to do it for 50 years to extend the affordability for the project. So it would be for 30 to 50 years. That's how long the policy be in place unless it's modified. And then I know we had a question about what does resident mean in the rent increase policy, a resident with rental assistance. And I think it essentially any unit that has project-based rental assistance of some type. So whether that's Section 8 or housing support or project-basst vouchers, those units, that's what the definition or what we're looking at when we say a resident with rental assistance.
There's another question, Summer, that came in. Is there something we can do to stop the recent rent increase?
I think we definitely appreciate all the comments today, and we definitely will, and all the comments that we received, and we'll continue to look at our policy and the options that are available to us today. And we'll just keep looking at our policies to see if there is anything that we can do retroactively or whether or not it would be applicable going forward. Right now, it's based upon from a tax credit perspective, it's moving forward, but I appreciate all of the questions, and we'll have more conversations and discussions internally.
Looks like we do have another person with their hand raised. Sadia Omar, I'm unmuting you.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Sadia Omar. I work with New American Development Center. The affordable housing and buildings are not only affordable, but they are not maintained in livable conditions. I work with more like suburbs in Imperial area, Plymouth. They're not maintaining housing. So is there any way that Image can follow up with this, the receivers of this tax credit?
Yes, we can. If you can provide either offline, if we'll connect with you to get what the name of your project is, and we can definitely pass it on to we have a compliance department that looks at compliance, and if there are issues, we can forward it on to them, and they can contact you directly to have more conversations about what you're seeing and the issues that you're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. We can. I can submit like issues and pictures of the units that are not livable at all. That would be great. Thank you.
All right, I think we'll start wrapping things up. We could not have a couple of people connect because their audio was not connected, but if you could make sure to reach out to Kelly today, or if you provided your number in the chat, she can reach out to you to provide your comments. I see one more number in here, so Kelly can reach out to you. And if you do have further questions or comments, we encourage you to send them to this email address that's listed here on your screen. And we will take public comments until tomorrow, Wednesday, October 5th at 5:00 p.m. Central Time. And then be sure to check our e-news as we get closer to releasing the final QAP. We plan to review the comments received and make final adjustments. And then we will be bringing this policy to our November 17th board meeting. So thank you, everyone, for your comments and your interest and partnership. And we just appreciate you being involved. James, would you like to, are you able to speak now? We still cannot hear you. Are you unmuted? Do you want to run over here real quick? You can run over to my office if you want.
thank you all for logging on today, for engagement, for all of your candid comments and sharing your experiences. We really appreciate it. We hear you, we are listening, and we just appreciate you engaging in the process and letting us know your thoughts and your feedback. So thank you all for logging on today. We appreciate it.